Ah, this is working. Okay. So. How's this going? I can see everybody. This is good.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. What's up, David B?
What's up? How's it
David B
going?
in the house.
Gabe Alders, rocking the beard.
Mm. You guys should have done this last week and just set up one huge webcam.
That's a good point, actually.
Because that would have worked really well on Egypt's internet.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, it would work as well as mine's working right now. It's just more people run the camera.
That's true. But then you are mostly just a kind of smear across the screen beneath.
I can't help that. That's just how I was born.
A little bit out of focus. Oh.
I'm gonna just share both the links this time and see how it goes. If we end up with too many people on this side and it crashes Hangouts or something, then we'll just change it next time.
Do you have the ability to boot though? If some weird
I
person
can
comes
turn
in,
people down.
can you close them off completely? Get someone just like in his birthday suit.
Hannah, could I suggest as first order of business a time limit? Or I think we might get bogged down in many things.
Yeah, I think we might need to use up until past for today's.
Yeah.
So
That sounds sensible.
it's gonna be about 40 minutes, I think. Or it's 50. Yeah, 40 minutes now. Yeah, I don't want to be doing it for too long. Oh, and I need to post a different link. Right. Right, so let's see how this goes. So first order of business, yep, we'll finish in 40 minutes at past, no matter what. Try and wrap it up. Main thing that I want to cover today is just sort of an overview of the public API work that's left to do and try and figure out whether or not it's realistic to get it done in the next 2 weeks and who might be working on what. My main concern is that there is quite a lot of stuff still left to do that we want to sort of clean up before we let people at the API. Because we're quite worried that it's just people will start building stuff and then we'll want to break it. And that obviously provides difficulties with backwards compatibility and stuff that we just don't want to be dealing with. So if we can make all the worst and most obvious all the changes we know we want to make now, that's obviously better. And the other second concern for that is obviously permissions and security, making sure that the API that we ship is actually working the way that people would expect and they haven't got access to data, or that doesn't provide access to data that people shouldn't have. I think it's all in a reasonably sensible position in terms of permissions now. There's just a couple of concerns around providing counts for things like how many posts does a tag belong to, that sort of accidentally takes into account every single post rather than just published posts, and figuring out how to handle that. So those are the key concerns. I'm not sure how much of the things that we want to get done we're actually going to be able to get done. And I've been trying to thin it out a little bit as well so that we can sort of reduce down what we intend to ship. So what's left in the public API section of that issue that I linked to in the dev channel? There is, I don't know if starting with the top is going to really work, but we'll try it. So the validation stuff has been largely completed. And I think it's probably in a good enough state to go with. We can always improve how much sort of messaging and handling we have around people trying to do bad things. So if they actually just send stupid requests to the API, what happens? We can always improve that, but I don't think it's necessarily something that has to be absolutely perfect for the first version. So we can probably sort of discount that for now. The fields parameter is in, it has no tests, and it's a bit buggy. It's another thing that just needs a little bit of cleanup. The filter parameter is the sort of big daddy with the GQL stuff that adds a different way of querying the API. That's been open for a while. It needs some sort of, people to look at it, test it, see what they think, and see whether it can be merged or whether it's going to be a big pain. The big part of that is that can work all on its own. We can add it in now and encourage people to use that way of using the API. The question is, do we also switch off the old way of using the API at the same time, or in the sprint as well? So that means where at the moment you can ask for posts with a tag of a particular type, turning off that and requiring people to use the filter way of doing that, which again we could just drop removing the old stuff in favor of only adding the new one in now and making people realize that if they use the old version of the API or the old way of doing things with the API, that will change. And the static pages stuff, the changing of those parameters on the API are all related to that as well, because it depends on whether we need to be able to deal with it with the current system or the new filter system. Order parameter, nice to ship, be great to ship that because it ties in with loads of stuff to do with tag ordering. I don't think it's that hard. Pipeline refactoring can do as much or as little of that as we want, and the relations and joins, cleanup and permission stuff is the stuff I've already talked about. And at the bottom of this list we have all the stuff that Sebastian has been working on. I think, Sebastian, you're pretty much done. Do you know roughly with the public API?
What is missing are some tests.
Okay.
And correct handling of CORS, cross-origin headers.
And I think we tested it out with the cross-origin.
Yeah, we tested it out with a header that was set to accept everything.
And it worked okay.
Yeah.
And the down or the flip side of that, sorry, is the extra part of that is we need to have a little helper in Ghost Themes to make that work properly.
What would make it nicer to use for developers is a helper that would assemble a correct URL with the app secret and the app ID. Or maybe add the metadata in the head so that you can get app ID and app secret from the head. Something like that would be nice to have.
Yeah, that's a reasonably small piece, I think.
Yeah, it's not complicated.
Okay, so that then leaves a couple of things that are at the very bottom of the list. The get helper, which I finished up over the weekend and is basically mergeable at this point. And again, it changes if we punt towards the filter way of using the API. But as it stands, it works.
Are we going to break anything with adding filter and removing all the other ways to access data?
In the get helper?
Yeah.
No, you won't break anything. It just will need some additional help to understand.
Okay.
Just needs I've already written that code. It just needs like the tests and cleanup. You go with it. Right. So there are two other things that I put on the bottom of the list that are things that just sort of need more of a discussion, I think, at the moment, which is the what we're going to do with error messages. Kevin, you had some concerns about error messages.
Yeah, mostly it's moving towards more of the expected Ember Data or JSON API format, because at the moment, if we get errors back, we just get a message about what the error was. There's no way to tie it up with the property that the error occurred on. I think there's still some outstanding issues in Ember Data for having kind of global error states, but this for the read-only public API, it's not going to make any difference, I don't think.
Okay, so it's something we can punt until the next revision.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. The other thing that I put on this list, which needs a little bit of thought, is how we're actually going to handle API versions, because at the moment they're in the URL, and it's v0.1, which is horrible. And we want to, at some point, flip it over to v1, which I know that John has been desperately waiting for. I'm not sure if we should have the version in the API string at all. I've been thinking about this. It's pretty common to do it, and it works. The thing that's holding me back or tripping me up is in most applications where there's a JSON API provided, the API is kind of like this extra thing which is shoehorned on the side of the application that they write after they write the rest of their code. And so it's kind of like a stable thing. And when they change it, and they know they've changed it. But Ghost's JSON API is a front end to the entire, it basically is the application. The model layer that sits underneath it is how everything works. So if we change anything at all about anything to do with data or how the model works or how the API, that whole structure works, do we have to reversion the URL? And then how do we have multiple versions of the URL without then massively duplicating the code base? Effectively, the Ghost API changes every time Ghost changes. So it's the Ghost version that's important, not the API version. I'm not sure if you've got any thoughts on this, John, or anybody else?
I thought that was actually a really good point. I don't, but how would you even maintain different API versions if the underlying Ghost code is different then?
You'd have to duplicate the entirety of Ghost.
Yeah.
Or have massive if statements in the code somewhere that say, if the request has this in it, do this, otherwise do that, which is a nightmare.
So doesn't this essentially make a versioned API not feasible?
That's what I've been thinking, yeah. I think we should just take the version string out and just be like, here's the API.
How does that reconcile with people who are going to build on top of the API and then we change something and their shit breaks?
That's a very good question. Basically, when Ghost changes, when you upgrade Ghost, the API may change. If it's a breaking change to Ghost itself, then the API may have a breaking change. We know when we do those things, but it's very, very difficult to separate those sorts of changes from the rest of Ghost. There's lots of heads and hands. That's not a good sign. It means I've asked a hard question. Yeah, so that's what I've been thinking. I've been thinking that maybe we should just take that out, because even if we duplicate just the API layer of Ghost and had multiple versions of that, there's no guarantee that we've captured the thing that changes, because so much of it is dependent on the model layer.
Have we looked at how other self-consuming API apps do this? I think Google Plus is an example of that. I'm pretty sure Google Plus consumes its own API in order to do.
Stripe and its dashboard does the same.
Yeah. How do we know how they handle any of this?
Stripe lets you set your version via the dashboard, so you can upgrade to a newer version, but never downgrade.
Yeah.
And once you are on the new version, you have to live with the new version or make it work with the new version.
I have no idea how they deal with that behind the scenes, though.
No.
They might just be running multiple versions. They might be.
It's probably easier for them because they have one piece of software.
Yeah.
And not hundreds of blogs.
Thousands.
Millions.
I think they have somewhere a write-up on how they did it. There is a blog post somewhere where
That'd be cool.
where they explained it, how technically.
Yeah,
If you
because if we
can
did that
drop
out,
that in Slack.
that'd be great.
But
Yeah.
presumably we're not the first people to ever come across this predicament.
No, I don't think we are. I think that we're just sort of slightly odd because we are both, we're multiple. There are multiple instances of Ghost. We're not one application, and because our API is not a bolt-on, it's fundamentally part of the software. Anyway, I don't think that we necessarily have to answer this question in this meeting. I just wanted to raise the question and get people thinking about it because we do need to answer it in the next 2 weeks. So yeah, let's think about that and decide.
I'm okay with removing the API string. We would need some kind of endpoint to determine what version the blog is running on, so that an application, for example, a desktop application for writing blog posts, can say your current version of Ghost is not supported, because they can detect it by querying for the version. Everything else, I wouldn't mind to always have the latest version of the API, or only make backwards compatible versions of the API for one release, and have some kind of a header string included that gives you the old version for a certain amount of time, and after a major version bump, the fallback version goes away, like depreciated functions.
Yeah, it's very similar. It's going to be very similar to how we have themes at the moment, and we haven't really got a strong process for handling deprecations in themes. But when a new thing gets added, when we add something new to the API, there's a new endpoint or a new method, it doesn't matter because that doesn't change how old applications should talk. It's only when we change things.
That's also the case in Stripe. If they have a non-breaking change, you get it immediately, but breaking changes are held back with the version number.
Yep. So it's something that we could take the version string out, and when we decide that we actually need to make breaking changes, that's the point at which we have to start thinking about this.
I don't know if taking the version string out makes much sense, because as Sebastian was saying, then you still have to try and detect what version of Ghost they're running to be able to anticipate what version of the API they're expecting, right? So you're either checking for it on the receiving end or on the sending end, but either way you need to know what the expected response of the API is going to be. So it's kind of the same thing, just approached from two different perspectives.
Yeah, but it makes it easier to keep an app up to date if you don't have to change the URL all the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's easier to handle the URL without the version string.
Good point.
Yeah, it makes it. I know what you mean though. If you're an app and you say, "Hey Ghost, I want this response from this version of the API," how does it declare that? That's what it's expecting.
Special header, maybe?
Yeah.
But only for breaking changes.
Which we can. It's a bridge. Yeah, it's a bridge that we might just have to cross later. I'm not sure that there's much planning we can do because we don't know what our breaking changes are going to look like.
Well, that might be a good place to start, is to come up with a use case for A, how the API might be used, and then B, how it might be changed, and see what the expected result would be.
A breaking change. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
A breaking change for me would be if a property changes from an object to an array. And a non-breaking change would be a new property in a response.
Yeah, it could also be things like the default sort order in which we're returning things. Like if someone writes a widget to return a list of posts or a list of tags, what order do we return them in? There might be an expectation around a theme using that in a certain way to display a list of posts. And if that was a change, that would be
That would be
problematic.
breaking for me.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
And I wouldn't expect some special order when there is no filter argument given.
well, it would go to the default, wouldn't it? Of all the filter arguments, all of them have a default. So if one is not specified, then you get the default. The default
Yeah.
might change.
Yeah, or the default is just random.
Ha!
So default. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be more of a documentation issue than API version change? If it's documented that you can't rely on the order by default, then if it changes, it's not a breaking change.
Partially, but then you kind of have to tell developers to always specify every single parameter because the defaults might change, and that kind of.
That sounds like two wrongs, isn't it? Anyway, that just sounds like two wrongs trying to make a right. It's the same as tags not originally having an order, and then people have made themes to try to pull it out, and now it has an order.
Yeah.
The other question to ask is, what's the worst thing that happens if the API breaks? Someone has to fix that code. We have to fix that code all the time too.
Yeah, which isn't a big issue now. We're more kind of slightly pre-optimizing for the eventuality that someone will have a paid product built on top of the API and they start losing customers and revenue because we did something that fucked that shit up.
Yeah.
But
and a lot of that is then to do with just making sure that people are aware more than anything else, like communication.
Yeah, that's very fair.
But I think, anyway, I've raised the question. It's a hard question. We're going to have to think about it. We've got 20 minutes left, so let's have a little think about what we actually think we can achieve in the next 2 weeks. And I haven't got much of a plan for how to go about this. I know what things I've been working on, and I think what things that Sebastian have been working on. Sebastian, you have the OAuth side of things to wrap up. You know what that looks like?
For next 2 weeks, I have to finish the public API thing, and then start on the OAuth, on the authenticated queries or authenticated requests.
What do you mean by that?
The other things that are missing.
Do you mean
from the OAuth flows?
Okay, but we don't need those to ship public API.
Did you mean that, or did you just mean the public API thing?
Just public API at the moment.
Just public API, yeah.
So we've got there's the open pull request that needs wrapping up.
Yeah.
Right, and then on top of that there is the helper for themes to make that work. Right, so that's two things.
Sorry, I was way ahead.
Yeah, way ahead. Let's try and ship one thing.
Sorry.
So that leaves all of the other stuff to do with the API to be done, basically. And I know that I can't wrap up every other piece of that on my own. So where do we draw the line? Is the question that's on my mind. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to ship the filtering stuff or not. Okay. And if we don't ship it, that means there will be breaking API changes in future.
Can I suggest coming up with 3 basic use cases and then structuring this around that?
Okay.
For example, a widget in a theme, an app that pulls in your Ghost posts, a native app that pulls in posts, 3 basic things like that, and just try and make those 3 things achievable, and then.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, because the get helper is essentially finished, and Sebastian only has minimal work for wrapping up the API itself, the amount of work that we have to do to make those things possible is very small. I think we've got a couple of days' work between us maximum. Right, Sebastian? Yeah. Okay, so the question then becomes all about what stuff we need to ship in order to feel comfortable with shipping this stuff. So do we want to ship the filter stuff as well? Because that's what makes a lot of those use cases possible. whereas at the moment they're simply not. You can't do the things that you'd expect to be able to do with an API. So you say, like, for example, I want to pull in 5 posts which have the same tags as the current post. That's one of the use cases I've been working on. I need the filter stuff to make that work. And I think for that reason, it's kind of important that we do push towards doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, so in that case, we can pull in David to help out with some of this stuff. And the other question is, do we try and rope Kevin into doing API stuff, or whether we leave him on his Ember stuff, because there's loads to do there as well.
I'm happy to take a look at it. I don't know how productive I'll be. It's probably new to Node, but yeah. The other thing is, if we're changing the query parameters and filters and things like that, will there be any breaking changes for the admin?
Yeah, there will be. So we can certainly get you helping me to fix those. I mean, in fact, getting you to fix those for me would be amazing.
Okay.
So in that case, what I'd suggest we do, we merge in the filter stuff that's already done in the state that it's currently in.
I've read most of it. It looks good.
Okay, there we go. There's a seal of approval from the corner. Let's just take it. It's fine. Let's merge that. And so let's merge it. Let's just get it merged, like right at the beginning of the sprint. Just get it done, and then assess from there what we have to do to get to the point where we're using only that method. So that is removing the existing parameters that are based on it, and then getting Kevin to fix up the admin so the admin is based on it. And that should be a set of stuff that we can ship.
That sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So that would also open up the ability to have for the tags UI, where you can get the posts which are linked to a tag and things like that.
Yes.
Yep.
That will start to make all of those things possible.
Oh yeah, I see. Which could then be implemented in the admin search as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To a point. So to explain, the big difference is at the moment the API has 3 parameters that you can pass to it. You can pass to it a single tag. Well, this is the post API. Sorry, a single tag, a single author, or featured true or false. And there's something to do with static pages, which makes no sense. So there's literally these 4 parameters that don't really work. They don't make any sense. They're great for the admin panel. They work for the admin panel. They don't really work for the wider use cases of using the API. What the filter parameter does is create an entire set of like language tools or parameter and query tools that you can use to say, I want all the posts that have this setting or that don't have this setting, and to build up complex, almost like SQL-like queries based, and you can do it against the posts API, the tag API, or the user API. And if I wrap up a few other pieces, we can do cross queries. So you can ask for all the posts which have a particular tag with certain other parameters as well. Like, you can really get complicated. That's the big difference. It goes from making our API be like, doesn't really do anything, to does all the things.
Yep.
I think what I would actually suggest that we do is perhaps for this next 2 weeks, I'm not sure if we should change the URL or maybe do something to say this version of the API is beta, like seriously beta. Hack against it all you like, but it will change. It categorically will change, and then go from there as to how we're going to manage that process long term.
You could go all indie phone and call it pre-alpha.
Oh, yeah. I don't know I don't know how to do that, but do you know what I mean? Like, just actually saying this version is so far alpha, you should only use it if you're really comfortable with changing your code in 2 weeks' time, and then handling the process afterwards.
Is that just for master, or are you talking about the actual next release?
The actual release, yeah.
I think do it.
We could even put beta in the URL, or pre-alpha.
Yeah. Or even put a labs flag in front of it. Something.
It's hard.
Don't know if that's actually possible.
That's quite hard. That's like a ton of work to just make.
Or you could make it just a checkbox in the labs panel that does nothing. That's checked that says I have read and understand the terms and conditions.
Of using the public API.
Exactly. Yeah. check by default.
What's this?
And if you unpick it, nothing happens.
Takes no accountability.
We could enable and disable the public API with an labs setting.
Yep.
Oh, we could. Well, that would. There you go.
No, all I was saying was it would be work to do so, like a reasonable amount. Therefore, I think, wouldn't it?
No.
No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's adding the Boolean value to the settings and then open the API or close it depending on if it's on or off.
Yeah, you're right. That would potentially be a good way to solve it just for now.
Yeah.
Everyone can get hold of it and get access, and woe be you if you use it, because it's definitely going to be changing.
Yeah, just to make sure that everyone understands what they are doing.
Yeah. Just for this version until we're more confident that we've got it nailed down and what we want the process to look like, and we can solve that hard problem of what API versioning looks like in the future then.
Yeah. Maybe make everyone less nervous about shipping things that aren't finished as well, which would be good.
Yes. It just means that we can ship something and actually say, hey, you can use this if you want, and get people. I mean, that's another nice thing about the labs flag, isn't it? It gets people hacking on it, and they can tell us how broken it is, and then we can fix it, and then we can make it public properly. Yeah. Okay, cool. Right. So the way that this list is looking at the moment, everything under the stuff to do with the Get helper, I'm considering to be my work to wrap up. The two things to do with filtering, definitely me as well. Sebastian needs to wrap up all the stuff to do with the actual OAuth, and I'm probably going to get you to look at the permission-y stuff as well. Making sure that the permissions are right and checking through them.
Yeah.
Kevin can do the labs flaggy bit, with the exception of the bit on the server side. Or, I'm not sure.
There should be sample code lying around.
Yeah, there should be, to be honest. It should be fine. Does anybody else want to get involved? Because if you do, you're welcome. Put your hand up and be like, I want to write some API code over here. Nobody. Right. Okay. Fine.
I was too busy eating.
Yeah, a bit late today. Show us.
Look at you with your road.
What are you eating?
It's this incredibly shitty Uncle Ben's 1 minute rice thingy. I was supposed to have steak, but the steak has gone off.
That's the saddest thing I've ever heard.
I know.
I'm glad we got the full context of the story there.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So time permitting, I'd love writing API code.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because there's loads and loads of other little bits and pieces to get involved with. The pipeline refactoring work. There's like lots of small pieces that can be picked up and done just for individual endpoints. And the more we get done of that, the better. And also, I know that David's volunteered to help with some testing and some documentation as well. So there's that. And then there's David B as well, who we might be able to rope in to do some documentation. Maybe a little bit. Because that's the other part.
That's if you want some good documentation.
Yeah, I can help with that for sure.
It might be something we just all have to pile in on at the end and just sort of splat stuff in. Like after the original Ghost release, when I did it all incredibly hungover the morning after the launch party. That's why our documentation is still awesome. Yeah, okay. So it is 20 past. Just trying to keep an eye on time. Try and get a bit more of a clearer idea of what's actually happening. what is left on here that's gonna trip us up. I think the bit that's gonna trip us up is gonna be getting the sort of cross resource joins working, and the counts, which that's going to be the hard part. That's the bit that's sort of still up in the air, because we need to be able to get connects to understand when we do a filter call that there's a relationship and how to link it, and then to combine those two things. For example, if I say, how many posts does this tag have? I need to understand that not only do I need to go and fetch posts, but I have to fetch the posts that are related to this call, which in the case of a public API call is always only ever published posts. Eyebrow dance of awesome, John. Did you follow?
It's processing that.
So yeah, at the moment we only ever use that cross-join count thing in the admin, where we say how many tag posts does this tag have, and in the admin panel we want to know all the posts. We want to know that this has 20 posts including drafts. When you make that call from the public API, it needs to inherently understand that it has to filter out data which is private. This is where our permissions start to get really complicated because of the way that our business logic works. The fact that we have a concept of draft and published and unpublished posts, and active and inactive users, and things like that.
Just off the top of my head, this might be completely wrong. Feel free to shoot it down. But would this be made any easier if a draft and a post were two separate entities rather than a single entity with two properties?
Yes, to a point, but that's a bigger piece of work to solve one day.
Is that desirable or not desirable?
I can't decide.
Okay.
It's something that I've wondered on. It's been in my brain for ages. Should we make two endpoints? Should we separate them completely? I've written big questions about it. I've asked Sebastian. It's a bit like...
I was under the impression that you could already choose to include all or just get the published ones, and then depending on your status, your permissions, that's, that would depend on what you can get. So I thought that was already there, that logic.
To a point it is.
But it sucks.
It does suck, and it also doesn't always cope with the fact that we've got this API layer on the top which handles permissions. And then underneath that we've got all the model logic. And they sort of say, can I access these posts? And then you go through the permissions barrier, and it's already said to you, yeah, you can access tags, for example. You can access this tag. And then you go, hey, when I fetch this tag, I also want the count of how many posts there are. It doesn't go back through the permissions layer to check whether or not you can also fetch those posts. It's sort of wired wrong. If that makes any sense.
And you said Sebastian's got that one, yeah?
I'm saying that's the one that I'm most worried about getting done in the time available. And whether we punt for also including all of that magic, or whether we disable it.
If we can manage to make it work, put it in, and if not, disable it.
Yeah.
I think that's okay.
It's a call we have to make later.
I think the last time we talked about separating drafts from posts, we agreed on thinking about it when we are going to do, what is it called, versioning.
As in post-versioning?
As in post-versioning, because then the problem comes back naturally again.
True. Yeah, to some extent. Slightly lesser extent, but there's that.
Yeah. So, with the last couple of minutes in the meeting, because it's quite difficult verbally to sort of talk about specific issues that I'm referring to without reading out numbers, that makes it kind of confusing. So I've tried not to do that too much, but now we need to sort of like just go through and quickly make sure that the ones that they're assigned so that we know what we're expecting. So the stuff that I've referred to as validation, that is check objects for API calls, which is 2756. This is all the top of the list still. And the option handling, which is 2758. I'm just going to count that we've got that done enough for now and not assign them to anybody for now. The fields parameter just needs testing. I'm going to leave that for now and see where we get to, because it works enough for now, and I think we'll be alright to ship it behind a labs flag. Whereas if we were shipping public, then I'd want to test that a bit more, but because it's going behind a labs flag, I'm fine to leave that for now. The filter parameter stuff, the 2 issues, or the stuff that's open, I'm going to assign them to me. And I'm going to iron those out, get them to the right position, right place. And that includes sorting out the static pages parameter after we've merged filtering. So that also goes to me. That's those ones. Pipeline refactor is something that anyone can get involved in. It doesn't have to be done. It's there if anyone wants to do some work and help us make this easier. The joins and relations overhaul is the one that I'm worried about. That's 5615. That's the issue that I'm most worried about. I'm just going to leave that for a second. 4181, 4180, and 4184 are all for Sebastian, right? Assigning them to you. Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw the nod. It's all good. And then what I need to do, which it doesn't exist at the moment, is write an issue which is handling what happens when we merge the filter parameter, so moving everything over to use that way of working so that Kevin can work on the front end and I can work on the back end of that. So I'll probably raise 2 issues, one for each of us. Is that right, Kevin? I see a nod.
Yep.
Kevin, have you got any other things that you've got on your radar that you're hoping to or planning to or get done in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, mostly around what we're changing anyway. So I'd like to get the settings panels and things like that as separate routes so that we can actually link to them from various other parts of the admin area. Yeah, so it's that.
Is that settings menus?
Yeah, so where you've got the bits which pop out from the side, we can actually link to those.
Makes you nervous of me.
So I did something.
Is there an issue for that?
There was mention of it somewhere. I don't know if there's an actual issue outstanding.
There's the one that I wrote, which was the tag improvements. Tag management UI updates, which says use routes for the tag setting screen. It sort of lumped a load of stuff together that was all in that area.
Yeah.
Did you want to?
What I was thinking of doing is doing something a little bit more general that moves us in that direction. And then once the filter API is in place, then we can start using it a bit more thoroughly.
Cool. Are you okay to write an issue?
Yep.
To sort of summarize what you're planning to do there? And then self-assign it so we know that's kind of the stuff that's assigned for this week, or these 2 weeks.
Yep, no problem.
That's cool. And I think the last issue to do with testing and documentation might already be assigned to David.
You're going to have to be more specific.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. I don't know. It's...
No, I meant which David.
Oh, sorry. David W. Yes. Cobspur. Let's just call him that.
Well, at the moment, the bearded one and the shaven one would work.
Yeah. It's not going to work for long, though. Look at that shadow. Right, okay. So, yes. I'm going to assign the join relations cleanup to myself and know that it's one of those things where we're going to either get it done or not, and just, it's a punt. It's the bit that's questionable. Everything else should be fine. Not worried. Just that one. it's already 6:30. Does anybody else have anything else they want to talk about?
You may already be planning on doing this, but for the first release of the filter, you might want to like hold off on a blog post about it, because people have been asking about this for like so many months and already trying to create their own. That I would hate for people to, even if it says beta all over it, to start doing it and then run into tons of problems. So you may already have planning on doing that, but might want to hold off on actually announcing it and just let people know in Slack instead.
Yeah, I think it'll be. I think we want it to roll out slowly as it is anyway, so that we can fix bugs and stuff, rather than being like, "Hey, you can use all these things now," and then have everyone go, "It doesn't work." Which, it's always sad.
I think this one's only ever going to be on the developer blog anyway, so it should be targeted towards people who kind of understand.
Yeah, it will be covered in. I think we'll mention that it's there in the dev post, with many warnings, including may contain nuts and warning contents hot.
The big difference as well is that now in Slack we can say, well, you've got this, you can turn it on, try it, and feedback rather than keep saying, hey, it's coming soon. You can pull request and test it, which no one really wants to do.
Right.
So at least you got that initial.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely. We've had very, very little feedback from what's been sat there in the repository for a couple of months. Putting it behind the flag.
It would be cool at some point if you enable a labs feature that a little comment box appears below it, which just emails all your rage to Hannah. So, like, enable this feature, tell us what you think, and then that just goes to Hannah's personal email address.
I don't know if I'd call that cool. I think I'd call that cruel.
Okay, maybe not to your personal email address, but it would be a neat way to get on-the-fly feedback. Sometimes people are too lazy about, they'll use something, find that it's broken, and then they can't be bothered to go to GitHub and do anything with it. So it'd be a neat way of aggregating basic, off-the-cuff responses.
You could
people as they trust them. You could rickroll them. What, like, so you write a comment, when you hit submit, it just plays Rick Astley.
Like a little Easter egg.
We appreciate your feedback.
I know it's after time, but I have one last thing.
Go for it.
I don't know if there's a blog post that you just told us about the form a long time ago, but for everyone asking about the form in Slack, is there like somewhere that we can point them as to here's why it went down because it had no support, blah, blah, blah. Is there a link somewhere, something like that?
No.
Rather than letting them just rage and then leave?
No, but we could make one. We could do a support post quite easily.
Okay. That'd probably just be a good idea because, I mean, there's obviously good reasons that it went away, but people don't see that right away, and it's hard to explain in 5 minutes before they leave.
It would be good because, as well, it's not like everything just goes to the same place. The real popular, the biggest hitting things are directed to a tutorial that's relevant. So.
Yep, that's a good idea. Can someone write that down and tell Sarah?
Yep. I've got a list here.
Cool.
Cool. Okay. Let's see how this pans out and if we can make this happen. John, the one thing I would say to you with regards to this is that at the moment there's nothing waiting on design pieces, but that some of the future work is going to wait on design pieces. For example, the OAuth flows. And I know that there have been concepts and things run around. I think any HTML and CSS is probably pre-myth. So something to put on your radar for the very near future is revisiting those things and seeing if we've got an idea of what they should look like.
Yeah, the design's definitely done. I don't think I did any HTML and CSS for those, but I know that all the basic kind of OAuth flows are covered in terms of design, so it should just be a case of throwing them together.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything major. It's just a case of I don't want it to get to the point where we're like, wait a minute, we need this, and then being blocked. We might as well sort of pre-plan that.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Cool. Right.
One other thing on the design side, some kind of mock-up of how the post filtering would work would be useful.
Good point. Yeah, I've got some ideas around that. Is there an existing issue for the functionality side of that?
I don't know if there is.
No, there's no existing issue for the user interface side of that. There is only one for the API side.
Okay, so you probably don't want to do that in one issue. Yeah, I'm going to write that down. Yeah, I'll have a look at that. Is that for this sprint or the next one?
Probably the next one.
Yeah, the only thing which might be useful in this one is if you were on the tag page and you wanted to go to the posts which have that tag, if the filter API is in place, then having some way to show that the list has been filtered by a specific tag would be useful.
Yeah, we get into the crossover here. This isn't really useful for this particular meeting, but it's the crossover between what stuff you would have in a full text search bar and what stuff you'd have in a dropdown, which is more of a sort by than a filter by.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, let's go through that in an issue rather than right now because we're over time already.
Yep. Cool. All right, let's call time on this, and yeah, kick it off. I will try and do some sort of quick write-up and link to this. And the things that we've sort of said that we need to do, like writing issues and stuff, it'd be good to get them done as soon as possible so that we just have a clear idea of everything moving forward. Everyone all right?
Sounds good.
Good.
Yeah, good. I'm pretty excited about getting this done. It's going to be awesome. It opens up a lot of possibilities. Yeah. Happy faces? No? Confused faces? Thumbs? Anyone got any thumbs? Yeah, thumbs. Cool. Okay.
See you guys in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Close bracket meeting.